This is Of the World, Chronicles of Civilization. In a world defined by boundaries, some stories cannot be contained by borders. Today, we step back to the defining crossroads of the 20th century, a conflict of blood, iron, and ideas that shattered empires and remade the globe. This is the story of World War II. The global catastrophe of 1939 to 1945 was forged in the unresolved ashes of the Great War. The Treaty of Versailles had crippled Germany, fostering humiliation, massive inflation, and political chaos. In the 1930s, this instability gave rise to totalitarian regimes: National Socialism in Germany under Adolf Hitler, fascism in Italy under Benito Mussolini, and radical militarism in the Empire of Japan. Aligned under the Tripartite Pact, these Axis powers sought to dismantle the international order. Meanwhile, the League of Nations stood by helplessly as Manchuria and Abyssinia were invaded, and the Western powers chose appeasement, a fatal miscalculation. On September 1st, 1939, German forces surged into Poland under the doctrine of Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Coordinated armored panzer divisions, motorized infantry, and close air support from the Luftwaffe bypassed static fortifications, crushing Polish resistance. In response, Great Britain and France declared war. In the spring of 1940, the phony war ended. German columns bypassed the heavily fortified Maginot Line by sweeping through the dense Ardennes forest. Within weeks, Allied forces were trapped against the sea at Dunkirk, forcing a desperate sea evacuation of over 300,000 soldiers. France capitulated shortly after. Under Prime Minister Winston Churchill, Britain stood alone. The Royal Air Force fought the Luftwaffe to a standstill in the Battle of Britain, forcing Hitler to cancel his planned invasion. Frustrated by the British stalemate, Hitler turned his ideological fury eastward. On June 22, 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, deploying over 3 million Axis soldiers along a 1,000-mile front into the Soviet Union. This war of annihilation aimed to seize Soviet grain, oil, and territory while eliminating the Slavic population. Axis armies drove deep toward Leningrad, Moscow, and the Caucasus, encircling entire Soviet armies. However, the sheer scale of the Soviet territory, the determination of the Red Army, and the onset of the brutal Russian winter bogged down the German advance. The Eastern Front became a meat grinder, consuming millions of lives in the largest and most savage theater of war in human history. As war raged in Europe, expansionist Japan sought dominance in Asia. Facing an American oil embargo, Japan launched a surprise preemptive air raid on the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, on December 7, 1941. The attack drew a previously isolationist United States into the war. The United States, under Franklin Roosevelt, mobilized its vast industrial power, becoming the arsenal of democracy. In June 1942, the U.S. Navy achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of Midway, sinking 4 Japanese aircraft carriers and permanently halting Japan's naval advance. From that moment, Allied forces began a grueling island-hopping campaign across the Pacific, recapturing Japanese-held strongholds at Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa at an immense cost in human lives. By late 1942, the Axis advance reached its absolute limit. In the ruined city of Stalingrad, the Soviet Red Army engaged the German Sixth Army in a desperate street-by-street battle of attrition. Encircled and frozen, the Sixth Army surrendered in February 1943. Stalingrad shattered the myth of German invincibility, turning the tide on the Eastern Front permanently. Concurrently, in the deserts of North Africa, British General Montgomery defeated Rommel at El Alamein, pushing the Axis out of Egypt and launching the Allied invasion of Sicily and Italy. In the Atlantic, Allied convoys utilizing radar and broken Enigma codes defeated the German U-boat menace, securing the supply lines necessary for the liberation of Europe. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, the Western Allies launched Operation Overlord. Under General Dwight Eisenhower, 160,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, France, under murderous fire, breaching Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Within months, Normandy was secured, Paris was liberated, and Allied armies pushed toward the Rhine. Simultaneously, the Soviet Union launched Operation Bagration, destroying the German army group's center and pushing into Poland. Even a desperate German counterattack in the snow of the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge, failed to stall the Allied advance. Squeezed between the Western Allies and the advancing Red Army, the Third Reich collapsed in a vise of blood and ire. In April 1945, Soviet troops entered the ruins of Berlin. With his empire in ashes, Hitler committed suicide in his bunker on April 30th, and Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 8th, Victory in Europe Day. The Allied advance revealed the full scale of Nazi atrocities. Entering camps like Auschwitz and Dachau, soldiers witnessed the horror of the Holocaust, the state-sponsored industrial genocide of 6 million European Jews, alongside millions of Romani, political prisoners, and others. The subsequent Nuremberg trials established that just following orders was no defense for crimes against humanity, setting new precedents for international law. While Europe celebrated, the Pacific War reached a devastating climax. Facing a fanatical defense of the Japanese mainland, U.S. President Harry Truman authorized the use of the atomic bomb. On August 6th and 9th, 1945, atomic weapons devastated Hiroshima and Nagasaki, instantly vaporizing tens of thousands and ending the war on September 2nd. World War II cost over 70 million lives, mostly civilians. It ended European colonial dominance and created a bipolar world dominated by two nuclear-armed superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, initiating the decades-long Cold War. To prevent future catastrophes, the United Nations was established. 80 years later, the lessons of World War II, of the cost of unchecked fascism, the fragility of democracy, and the devastation of global warfare remain vital warnings for humanity. This has been Of the World, Chronicles of Civilization. The guns have fallen silent, but the stories never will.